people, I think, competing in the 5K and doing that, which is a beautiful day to do that, by the way. So I wish they were here, but I understand that they're doing that, and that's good. I wish they were here because this is the most important one that we're covering for the week. I appreciate Pastor getting us started a little early because I want to make sure you have the information here. So we talked about, I've been saying that maybe we could get a discount from Florida Hospital for the Creation Health Kit. I got confirmation yesterday morning as we were finishing up. They texted me, if you're interested in getting the Creation Health Seminar Kit for adults, they might apply the discount for the other products, I'm not sure, but that for the Seminar Kit for the adults, they said email Matthew. I was on the team with Matthew before I left Florida Hospital for the Union. Matthew, I always called him Matty, so I don't even know how to pronounce his last name. He was Matty to me. Janetsko. So you have the email there, and if you have trouble with email, that number should get you to him. For those of you who have been around Florida Hospital for a long time, they renamed this department within the past 12 months to Florida Hospital Integration and Culture. So it's no longer mission development, he's in integration and culture. But contact Matthew at that email. And what you need to tell him is tell him you were here, tell him you were at Lynell's Creation Health Seminar at Carolina Camp Meeting, and that I told you that Florida Hospital said you could get a 20% discount off the kit, all right? So that drops the kit from $350 down to like $270. So that's an $80 savings. You're welcome. Well, thanks to Florida Hospital. By the way, Betty, when you get back to I'm not going to have a lot of time to talk afterwards. So what are you going to be using for your topics for those 7 weeks in a row for your health lectures when you get back and you're doing that at the Chamber of Commerce? I'm just curious. New Start. That's New Start's a good program too. So have you done New Start before? Yeah. So you're familiar with that. And being a nurse, that helps too with when you're doing anything when it comes to health. Okay, good. I meant to ask you yesterday and didn't have a chance. So you're going to get 20% off that. Here's the thing. When it comes to Creation Health, when you give this seminar, people always ask 3 questions, and I don't want to take a lot of time because I want to get into the topic. But question 1 is, they ask, how do we advertise for it? Keep this simple. Don't spend thousands of dollars in advertising. What I would do if I were you is I would order some what they call postcard mailers, and I think the best place to get those is at an organization called OutreachMarketing.com. OutreachMarketing.com. So it's OutreachMarketing.com. They have dozens and dozens and dozens of pictures and designs to match whatever theme you want for your Creation Health thing. I think it's like $70 or $80 or $90 for 500 of those postcards. So it's not that expensive. So you get your postcards at OutreachMarketing.com, and then you take it like to Kinko's or something and have photocopied on the back your event information, where it's going to be held, the time, stuff like that. Keep it simple. And then what I would do is I just ask my church members to give a couple out to their friends. Just give them to their friends. If you have a friendly church, this will go really well. If your church isn't as warm as you'd like it to be, then, it might be challenging. But if you only have 6 or 7 or 8 come to your first Creation Health seminar, that's fine. I really believe that's fine because you're really practicing the first couple of times out. You probably don't want 100 people there. But there are some communities, for the first time out, they have 50 people. I know one in Alabama, they started, the women's leaders did it, and she started with 30, and each week, people of other faiths who didn't know about the Seventh-day Adventist Health message were bringing their friends saying, you've got to come hear what we're learning at this Creation Health seminar. So sometimes the meeting grows, sometimes it stays the same, doesn't matter. God will use you as you work with Him in becoming equipped to share this message. So I know churches have spent $5,000, $6,000 on postage. Don't do it. It's a waste of money. Just invite your friends, invite your members to bring their friends. Use a postcard mailer from OutreachMarketing.com. Second question people always ask is, well, should we charge? You can charge. You don't have to charge. I would charge if it were me. And if there was someone who really couldn't afford to come, I'd have the church give them a scholarship. And you can charge whatever you want, but the common price I see churches charging is between $20 and $25 for the 8-week series. And they do it for a couple of reasons. One, to offset the costs, which I'll mention where those come in next. And 2, so people have a buy-in. A lot of times if people don't pay something, they don't appreciate it. And 2, if a church is doing something for free, these days, a lot of times people wonder what your agenda is. You're doing it for some reason other than just being altruistic. So I would charge something, but you don't have to. It's totally up to you, and you follow the leading of the Holy Spirit. Okay, so you have your outreach marketing postcards. You might or might not charge, depending on what your church votes to do. Thirdly, what do you need to conduct a class? Well, you certainly need the kit. So you have your videos and you have your slides. A class lasts about an hour long. You'd start by playing the video, which is about 15 minutes in length on average. And then when the video is done, you talk about it, which I've not really modeled that well this week for you because we've been having a nice time having a conversation as we go along. But you'd talk about it, and then when that's finished, you would show your 20 or 25 or 28 PowerPoint slides that you chose from the 68 that you're being given for each presentation. And that takes an hour. Those of you who like group components, there are 4 small group, activities you'd say per principal. You'd choose one of the 4 and just do it. Divide the room into groups and do that. So without the group, it's about 60 minutes. With the group component, it's about 75 minutes. You need to stay on time. If you go over what you tell people that you said you're going to do, they will not come back. So a Creation Health seminar, the group component should not last any longer than 90 minutes. I don't do group work. That's not because I don't think it's valuable. It's because I don't do a good job, I don't think, with small groups and that sort of thing. So I stick with the DVD, I stick with the slides, and I enjoy a conversation. I can facilitate a conversation better than I can groups. But if your strength is groups, do groups. So what you need, thirdly, they say, we're talking about what you need for the seminar. You need the kit, obviously. I know I'm going fast, but I'm trying to get to the content. But what you really need is you need to make sure that everybody has the Creation Health Seminar Personal Study Guide. Some of you bought it. I don't see it in here this morning, but it's the one that the ABC's been selling for $25. They need that. I never do a seminar without them having it. And the good news is, if you can email Maddie, not only will you get a 20% discount for the kit, I don't think Florida Hospital advertises this, but they do it. They will sell you these books by the case, $15 to the case, and they'll drop the price to $15 a book if you buy it by the case. So you save $10 a book. And you'd tell Maddie how many cases you'd want, and you'd tell him that I told you that we had this conversation at camp meeting. I don't boss Maddie around, but Maddie's a friend. Matthew's a friend. Good. When I was there, they didn't advertise it. Because our team is so small, it gets really hard to deal with fulfilling orders. It really does. I mean, Creation Health really took off, and it was tough keeping up with it. You have to call him. You have to call. So you've talked to Matthew then. Good. Was he easy to work with? Good. I would think so, because he's that type of guy. So you talk to Matthew, you can order it by the case. And so what churches do is they charge this tuition, $20 or $25 to take Creation Health Seminar, and they use it to buy the book and whatever else they might do. Okay, so here's what you don't have to do. You don't have to have anything to drink or a snack. Keep it easy. Make sure the room smells nice and is comfortable. I say it smells nice because some folks, they'll use the church fellowship hall. And if you had a fellowship meal in there a couple days previously, sometimes the food smells stick around. They don't always smell the nicest. So make sure it smells nice. Make sure the room is inviting and warm. But don't kill yourself with thinking you have to have a snack and all this other stuff. Just keep it, make it easy, and just do it. And do the best job you can. So you know where to get the kit. You know how to get the discount. You know how to get the books by the case and get the discount there. And that's your contact person. If there's anything I can do to help, you don't need me when it comes to placing the order. I have nothing to do with Florida Hospital's Creation Health program when it comes to their products anymore. But those are my friends, and they are anxious at Florida Hospital to partner with local churches. And just in case you didn't know, it's not because Florida Hospital needs the money. Florida Hospital does not need the money from this. They are so mission-minded. They want to work with the church in improving the quality of people's lives in our communities. It's really a mission emphasis for them. So if you need my help, I'm never at the office. I'm always out traveling around. Email is the best way to get a hold of me or my assistant, Alicia Zinner. She can always track me down, and I can help. But I'm not as important when it comes to what you need to get your materials as is Matthew. And when you start your Creation Health seminar, you're going to have some questions. I've done it more than anybody on the planet. That's not to brag. If you were in my position, you would have done it more than anybody else on the planet. I say that to say this, I've made more mistakes than anybody else on the planet with Creation Health, which you would expect. So I can share my pain with you to spare you the pain you might experience. So I can answer some questions hopefully for you when you do your Creation Health seminar. Okay? I'm so glad we started early, Pastor Don. Hey, Glenn. You checking up on me? Okay. I've been telling people that you plan to use Creation Health in a major way next year in the conference office. Well, you are old. Your memory's failing. You told me that yesterday morning after worship. Come on. You might change your mind after this morning after hearing this. Yep. Okay. You just let me know. All right. Deep breath, Lynell. Whew. Are you ready to go? Now let's do it. This is our last one. The most important one. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to spend half the time on what outlook really means, and then we're going to spend the rest of the time sharing 4 principles of how people can transition into maintaining an optimistic outlook. The first part is what I teach, and because I have some personal experience with this, but we're going to get into that in a second or two. The Bible says, as a man thinks, so is he. Whatever is up here will manifest itself sooner or later. And this is not some Eastern mystical stuff. This is just the way it works. Here first, then out there. I love this. Watch your thoughts. They become your words. Words become actions. Actions become habits. Habits become character. And character becomes destiny. That's the way it works. That's the way it's always worked. It's the way it will always work. A positive outlook is a gift you give to yourself. A negative outlook is actually a gift you give to yourself too. It's just we might not be conscious that we're giving ourselves a negative outlook, which you'll see in a minute. The nice thing about a positive outlook is it increases the number of killer cells in your body that ward off disease. It's been proven over and over again. In fact, they found, I think this was a 20-year research. This is a 30-year research study. So I told you about the gold standard research that Creation Health cites. This is a 30-year study. They tracked 19,781 people. This is a solid study. And they found that an optimistic explanatory style is associated with a 50% decrease in the risk of mortality or early death. So perhaps we could say that a pessimistic outlook, maybe it's associated with increasing your risk of early death by 50%. That's not what the study is about, but I wonder if the reverse is true. This is probably, I would say, you know what? To me, this is the most important slide in the Creation Health material. The other one that's most important is, remember on, was it Monday, we looked at the 10 leading causes of death, and then the 8 root causes. That slide and this slide are the 2 most important slides in the material from my point of view. Anyone here heard of Dr. Martin Seligman? PhD, world authority when it comes to psychology, when it comes to outlook. He's written on other things. The guy is a great researcher. Sometimes his stuff in the old days was a little boring to read, but I believe you can trust his research. And he says, and we're going to spend some time here to unpack this, your habitual way of explaining bad events, your explanatory style, is more than just the words you mouth, the words you use when you fail. It is a habit of thought, what? Learned in childhood and adolescence. Your explanatory style stems directly, now listen to this, from your view of your place in the world. Whether you think you are what? Valuable and deserving, or worthless and hopeless. It is the hallmark of whether you are an optimist or a pessimist. So what he would say, what I believe he's saying here is, you're not an optimist because you're choosing positive language or positive thoughts, and you're not a pessimist because you're choosing negative language or negative thoughts. What makes a person either an optimist or a pessimist is, an optimist feels like they are valuable and deserving. A pessimist, at their core, their identity is an identity of worthlessness and hopelessness. There are only 2 types of people in this room today. There are some, and I think it's probably a small percentage, who actually believe they're valuable and deserving, and the other group feels they're worthless and hopeless. That's it. There is no in-between. You're one or the other. And I'll help you figure out a little bit more which one you actually are. I find that Christians, in particular, and it's really ironic because they shouldn't, but they really struggle with this. And I'm going to confess to you, I struggled with this for, Garrison will be 10 next month, so I struggled with it for 40 years. Things changed when he was born, and things started coming together, which I'll tell you in a second. But let me tell you how this works. My father comes from I've told this story. Dad's given me the permission to tell this story. And I know that, I spend time with him every year. They come to Florida, and I'll be with him, in a few weeks in New York. We save our money, and every year we go to a Yankees ball game, Dad, Garrison, and me. It's a father-son tradition type thing, and I hear the story every time I get together. Dad grew up in a very mean family. My dad's, and if they heard this, those who are still alive on his side of the family would be very upset with me. But it was a very rough, mean family. Grew up in upstate New York. On my dad's side, and they have longevity in their family. If they didn't smoke, they lived to the mid-90s, every single one of them. We came from an iron ore mining town. It's called LaMountain, L-Y-O-N, Mountain, New York, up there on the Canadian border. And most of my dad's relatives on his side, they worked in the mines back in the 20s and the 30s. So this was a group of people that were, they were rough. And Dad's father, Aunt Carol was telling me last summer, it's the first time I heard this, although I knew his dad was mean. Dad's father, my dad's name is Norman, his father's name is Norman. Dad's father, Norman, had the reputation, Aunt Carol told me last summer, as being the meanest man in town. It's a small town, but whether it's a small town or big town, you don't really want that label, I don't think. So Dad tells a story of how when he was young, he was abused by his dad, not sexually, but, violence. There was violence in the family, and his father was violent to Carol. And Dad, at the age of around 6, 7, or 8, decided he wasn't going to put up with it anymore. So this is like a little kid. And Aunt Carol's about 5 years younger than Dad, so she was even younger than he is. And so my dad's father, not only did he work in the mines, this guy was a brilliant man. He knew calculus and trigonometry. There wasn't anything. He was really an engineer. There wasn't anything he couldn't design and build, and he could weld anything. He was also musical, played the clarinet, and he enjoyed volunteering as a fireman. So he was a volunteer fireman, and every year that little small community, as a thank you to the firemen, they would give them a week at what they called Fireman's Camp. It was cabins on Lake Chateauguay. You can find it on the map. Lake Chateauguay, we have people from the city coming up. Even now when I go home in the summers, you see all these people from the city vacationing around Lake Chateauguay. It means chateau on the lake. My family's French. Dad never spoke French around me growing up because he'd been teased so much as a kid speaking French. He knows French and I don't, So anyway, he decided that summer when his father was at Fireman's Camp, his dad took him and Carol to Fireman's Camp. He decided that's when he was going to make a break for it. His father left for an errand, and Dad went down to the lake. I don't know why Dad went down to the lake. He went down to the lake, got in a rowboat with Aunt Carol, and they rowed along the edge of the lake up to Dad's grandparents' house. They were a couple hundred yards up. They lived on the lake as well. And so to keep this story straight, we call Dad's grandparents Mim and Pip. It's a French thing. So he went up to Mim and Pip's house. And he told Pip, now Pip worked in the mines as well, and Pip was French Indian. French Indian, about 5'4". I met Pip a few times as a kid, and the guy's arms, he was strong. And I never saw it, but Dad said Pip had a temper too. Well, I guess the family had to get it from somewhere, right? So he told Pip what his father had been doing to him and Carol, and Pip just got enraged. And Dad said he can still hear it today. Later on that afternoon, he heard these tires squealing up that little mountain road, and he said, I knew it was my father coming from Carol and me. And he said Pip knew it too, and Pip got up. He walked outside. He got a shovel from the woodshed, and all the guys who worked in the mines, you'd still see some of it until today, they would take like the leftover iron ore, pebbles and gravel and stuff, and they'd throw that down, and that'd be their driveway. It wouldn't be paved. They'd use that stuff. So his father comes into the driveway, and iron ore stuff is scattering all over the place. And Pip walks over towards the car. He takes that shovel, and he draws a line in the sand. And as Dad's dad gets out of the car. Pip raises the shovel, and he says, you cross this line to get those kids, you're getting this across your head. So Dad's witnessing this whole thing. So Dad's father knew not to mess with Pip, got in the car, drove off, and didn't want anything to do with the kids after that. Now, it's a strange family in the sense of it was a big family. You had these older kids who were working in the mines, and it was the late 30s by that time. A couple had been drafted and were in World War, around 39 or 40, after 41 went into World War II, so this is right before that. But then you had some kids, there were 4 kids left at the house who were just a little bit older than Dad. They're like 11, 12, 13. And they felt more like brothers and sisters than aunts and uncles at that age. So you had this spectrum of ages in this house. And Dad fled from his father's house of violence with Carol to his grandparents' house, which he thought was a place of safety. I mean, wouldn't you think typically you could expect your grandparents to be kind and safe and nice to you? I mean, you would. So he's there at Mim and Pip's house, and they took them in. And he said one day he was coming downstairs, and he overheard a conversation taking place in the kitchen with Mim from one of the daughters talking to Mim, and he stood there at the door casing and just listened. And she was doing her best to convince Mim to put Carol and Dad in an orphanage. And she was saying, there's not enough for them here. Put them somewhere else. Now, in upstate New York, you had still this profound sense of scarcity. The industry is not there. There's just no money. There isn't anything. And you had people preparing for the war, and people were rationing, and could only buy certain things on certain days and so much of stuff when you could buy it. There was this real attitude of there might not be enough to go around. And so he said he didn't hear it just once. He heard it multiple times, this girl in the family campaigning with Mim to get rid of the kids. And Dad said, I didn't know if on any given day Carol and I woke up, if that would be the day that Mim would put us in an orphanage, the Good Shepherd's Home. There was an orphanage right there in the area, and I can't remember the name of it. So let me ask you, you have this kid who just fled his father's home because of violence and took his little sister with him. He goes to his grandparents' house. He hears his family actively trying to get rid of him and his sister to be placed in an orphanage. What belief do you think that imparted to my dad? Do you think he felt valuable and deserving? He felt worthless and hopeless at the deepest levels. I mean, if your family can't love you, who does? If your family cannot love you, then you certainly don't measure up, and there must be something wrong with you, and you're totally unworthy and undeserving of being loved. Because if there's anybody that should be loving you, it should be your family. Warts and all. Warts and all. Now, Dad told me a story about Mim a couple of years ago that I didn't know, because he opens up a little bit more. One summer when he was 10 years old, and he had to go earn his own money for everything, he'd go set bowling pins in the bowling alley. The bowlers would pay him like 25 cents, I guess, or something like that for a game. And so he couldn't find enough money. He'd have to go do that for his own dental work and for everything he did. I guess he didn't have enough money. One summer as a 10-year-old, he said, Grandma, he said, I need a haircut. And he wanted her to help him go get a haircut. She said, you want a haircut? I can give you a haircut. So she sat him down. You're going to laugh at this, but it's not funny, but it's funny. It's one of those types of things. She sets him down in a chair. She gets the clippers out. You know what she did? You know what his grandmother did? Went right down the middle of his head and left it like that. Didn't shave everything off, just right down the middle. I don't know if she's like playing a joke or not, and it's funny, but this poor 10-year-old, in this situation. And so Dad said, he said I had to wear a baseball cap the rest of the summer so I wouldn't be made fun at and be beaten up. Because in upstate New York, in the late 30s, early 40s, in LaMountain, it was still a time where, the Polish stayed to themselves, the Italians stayed to themselves. They had these gangs and groups and cliques, and they were mean to each other. Things have changed, I think, but back then it was really cruel. So anyway, he ends up staying with Mim and Pip, but that belief never, ever, ever left him. It's amazing. Dad went on. He'd become a minister later on. And his number one gift, believe it or not, is relationships working with people. Intimacy is not his gift. But working with people is he wants them to never feel the pain he went through. So evangelists would hire him as their Bible worker. Lord would bless him, and at the end of the crusade, in fact, Dale Pollitt was here yesterday. Dad worked with Dale and Lyle Pollitt quite a bit, and there'd be 40, 50, 60 people prepared for baptism when the meetings were done. And Dad just loved it, and he became a minister after that. And even though he worked with people and he had a relationship with God, and mind you, Mom and Dad were never abusive to any of us kids, or 3 of us in the family. There was never any violence, But despite his growth and what happened, do you think he ever came to the point where he felt valuable and deserving? No. It's always there. And I know at some point he has to make a choice, and he's heard this presentation, and we talked about this a little bit as we can, which we really can't, it seems. And I don't know if a kid can ever really help their parents with this sort of thing. I don't think it probably works that way. I don't know. Maybe God can do something there. But so it never left him. Now, it got interesting. In the mid-'70s, like 1975, so this is like over 30 years later, right? Almost 40 years later. We were in Canada at the time, Oshawa, Ontario, and his father, so it was 250 miles away. His father calls up and says, calls him Junior. Dad hates being called Junior. I guess because of his father, It's almost like Indiana Jones. Don't call me Junior. So he calls him up and says, Junior, I'd like you to come and have Thanksgiving dinner with us. Out of the blue, he's had no contact with his dad for decades. And so I remember going to Gramps' house, and I can still see it walking up, and he was pleasant. I shook my dad's hand. There was no hug. There wasn't anything there that a normal dad or son would do. I see my son tonight at 7:45, and you better believe there'll be more than a handshake when I see him. Can't wait to see him. And I didn't think much about it then, but I look back now and realize how strange that kind of is. So we go into the house, and we had a pleasant Thanksgiving dinner, and then we left. And Dad remarked afterwards, because we were raised Seventh-day Adventist, and out of respect, Dad said, I was surprised that there was no ham at Thanksgiving. Now, his father wasn't a practicing Christian. He's a chain smoker. He lived a very rough life, did whatever he wanted to do, but it was Dad felt a sign of respect from his dad that there was just a turkey, and stuff like that. Well, the next year, his father invites us back, and we go back, the same thing, had a nice Thanksgiving dinner, food that we all could eat and enjoy. And so you see this relationship starting to resume again almost 40 years after the crisis had taken place. And Mim and Pip are still alive. They lived until the early 80s. But I just thought of this. To this day, not one time while everybody was still alive did I ever see Gramps and Pip in the same room together with my dad. I guess I can see why. So I don't know what happened there between Dad's father and Pip. But in 1979, we're up there on vacation in upstate New York. It's Mom and Dad's home. It's where they retired to. And so Gramps is really excited because, wouldn't you believe it, there was a big event happening the next year in 1980 in Lake Placid. You remember what that was? The Winter Olympics in Lake Placid. And it's a wonderful place to visit if you've not been there. And so the French did not like the plan that the Olympic Committee had put forth. Was it for the luge? I think it's for the luge. They said, it's either the luge or the bobsled. And they said, the mountain you've chosen, we can't put a competitive track on it. And so the French were causing quite a, story I've been told, were causing quite a problem. And so what they did was, I don't know how they did this, but it shows you the reputation. They called my grandfather. He'd been there for all those years, and he'd been known as an engineer and stuff like that. And they called him up, and they said, can you come and kind of consult with us? And so he did, and he said, well, that mountain won't pose a problem at all. And he showed them how they need to build a competitive track. So they put him in charge. He designed it, and he started a crew at the bottom, at the top, and they met in the middle, and they had their competitive track for the Olympics. And so Gramps was really excited to share this with us. So he got in his old blue Oldsmobile, and it was the first time I'd seen him happy. And he was smiling and driving along those roads, and we get up there to the Olympic Center, and he's showing us what he had built. Well, later on, I think it was that fall, that Dad, so now by that time we're in Texas. Dad had taken a call to Texas. And Dad gets a call that his father has just been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And it's not really a surprise because he smoked and never took care of himself and things like that. And what the doctor thinks, well, he told Dad, he said, I'm going to tell you because you're a pastor. He says, your father, I'm sad to tell you, your father's not going to make it. And he was very direct with Dad, so Dad could help with whatever needed to be helped with. And so what they think happened was Gramps was doing some welding, and he was welding some galvanized steel, and the fumes got trapped up underneath his mask. The doctors think that might have been the catalyst to start the chain reaction, but it probably would have happened anyway sooner or later. So Dad had a choice to make. Mom, her job, she felt, was to support Dad in ministry, so she did not work. She visited with him when it was appropriate and did things with him, and I don't think you get rich in church work, and we certainly weren't. And so Dad had a choice to make, and they didn't have any credit cards at the time, didn't really believe in it too much. So he only had enough money to go up there once. So you go up, he had to decide, do I go up now or do I go up for the funeral? Because I can only go one time. Well, there's really no decision to make, is there? If you can only go once, you got to go while the person's alive. So he goes up to LaMountain to see his dad. He says, Dad, so I walked in, saw my father, and his father had already lost half his weight. Had an oxygen can, the canister thing and assisted breathing, and he said he was just shocked at what he saw. So it was a Sabbath, and around Sabbath afternoon, they've been talking, and there are other people there during the day. In the afternoon, his father says, Junior, come into the bedroom with me. So Dad goes into the bedroom with his dad and helps his dad lay down on the bed and everything. And his father says, Junior, I'd like you to have worship with me. Now, I asked Dad 2 years ago, I said, well, what did you do for worship? And he said, I can't remember. I was so shocked that he asked me to have worship with him. He said, I just opened my Bible and started reading. So I don't know what he read. And he said, I felt in that moment there was obviously an opening. This must have been really hard for Dad, He said, so after we read a few minutes in the Bible, he said, I asked him, I said, Dad, he said, I asked my father two things. He said, Dad, why have we hated each other all these years? What was it about? And his father said, I don't know. He said, I'm so sorry. And so he said, Dad, would you like to give your heart to Jesus? He said, yeah, I'd like that very much. So Dad led his father in a prayer, giving his father's heart to Jesus Christ. And I tend to think that if Jesus can save the thief on the cross, he probably can save the meanest man in town. And his father died shortly after that. And what astonishes me is, so although the physical cure did not come, and oftentimes it does not come for certain reasons, despite there being an emotional cure, and I would say not emotional, I'd probably say a relational cure between Father and Son, and a spiritual cure between Son and Heavenly Father. Do you know how my dad still felt? Worthless and hopeless. And do you think that just kind of stays with a generation? Do you think maybe generations pass that on whether they want to or not? They pass it on whether they want to or not. In fact, my mom and dad, their hearts would hurt. Dad's heard me talk about this, but it's passed on to me. First 40 years of my life, to my core, I believed LaMountain didn't deserve anything. There was no opportunity for us. And we, because we are worthless, have absolutely nothing to offer anybody else. I don't know if anybody else can relate to that, but that's my former story. Until I started working with Creation Help and then had my son. It just shows you how deeply these things can be ingrained. And some of you in here are pessimists because you feel worthless and undeserving, but that's not a choice that you made intentionally. That's just how you were raised, with a belief that was just kind of slidden into your soul without you even wanting it or knowing it was happening, because that's just the way things worked in that situation. The church sometimes does not help. And I'm not targeting the Seventh-day Adventist church. I'm saying the church in general, because I've heard it many places I've gone, inside the denomination as well as in other communities of faith. I remember in our church, Beaumont, Texas, so I'm feeling this way as a kid that I'm worth nothing. And I went to prayer meeting every Wednesday night with Dad, and there was an elder leading out in prayer that night. And I still remember it today because it affected me so deeply emotionally. This elder got up and he prayed, and in his prayer, he was thanking Jesus for his grace. And I get what he's saying now, but I didn't get what he was saying then. And he said, "We are so unworthy and undeserving of your grace, for we are this is his exact words. I still remember them, and it's been about over 40 years. He said, "We are worth less than even the dust under our beds." And I'm thinking, I at least thought I was worth more than the dust under my bed. Now, if he knew the message that I received from that prayer, he would roll over in his grave today. But the lesson for us, those of us who are leading out publicly, we need to... I've been very free with you this week because we've had a special relationship, I felt. But if I were in a different environment, I'd be very careful with the language I was choosing. If you're leading out in church or at school or at the hospital doing something, we need to be very careful and precise with the language you choose so we're not communicating a message that's disempowering and discouraging people. Understand? You need to think twice about what you're saying, because maybe there's a better way to say it that will be empowering and supportive and things like that. So I grew up feeling this way, and things did not change for me until I saw this Martin Seligman quote. And I started working with Creation Health. That was the first piece. And then the second piece was the birth of my son on July 17th, 2017. July 17th, 2007. Since this is 2017, I'm getting it reversed. He's turning 10. I'm glad that he's a healthy young man. He's turning 10, but I almost cried at the thought he's turning 10 because it's going by like that, you know? And I just cherish every second. And I hope I still do when he gets to become a teenager. You know, we'll see. So Garrison is born, and I got a different picture of God. Anyone's picture of view of God changed when they had kids or grandkids? A few people. How many in here have kids? Okay, so almost everybody in the room. It changes you. I don't know how it changed you. I'll tell you how it changed me. So I always thought I was a grace-oriented person. In fact, I have a church member here, Mrs. Ivy Brooks, who was in Jacksonville, Mandarin, the last church I pastored. Was I grace-oriented in Jacksonville? I think I kind of was, wasn't I? Of course, you have to say this because I'm putting you on the spot. But things changed when I had my son. And I want to share with you at least another perspective of grace this morning. You have your own. You don't have to accept this. I'm just going to share my story with you. Here's what my son taught me about God. For the first time in my life, I related to God the way he's asked for us to relate to him, and that's as our dad. Jesus said, when you pray, call him Dad. On the cross, Jesus cried out, Abba, Dad. We can say all we want to say about God. This is now my story. You can have whatever perspective you want and belief you want. We have all these names of God, Rose of Sharon, and all these other things, and they all give us vignettes of who God is. At the end of the day, what's most important to me now is how God wants me to relate to him. That's more important than how, I think I should be relating to him. Because a lot of times in me relating to him, there's some emotional penance going on, or spiritual penance. So that with the Luke 15 story, the prodigal son and my son, I finally, I think, got it. I started relating to him as a father because I realized how much I love my boy. And like you love your kids. It's like, God loves me that way? I mean, God loves me because he wants to love me? I don't love my son because I have to love my son. Maybe when he's a teenager, there'll be times, I'm not sure. I love him because I just do. And so I got thinking about this. So let me ask you, he's with his grandparents this weekend. Jennifer's headed to Ohio camp meeting to sing. So when I get there, or when I get home, we get to Florida next week, he knows he's not supposed to play in the street. And my son, he doesn't know it because we don't talk about it, but he's autistic. He has Asperger's, so he's high-functioning autistic. Very smart boy. The teachers can't believe what they've seen this year in him. He's like off the charts, and reminds me of somebody else in the family, off the charts in science, in math, in engineering, spatial reasoning. Makes me wonder if Dad's dad was on the spectrum. So he knows he's not supposed to be playing in the street. He gets so easily distracted. So when say we're home next week, and we have a day or two at home for if to go somewhere else. Say he's playing in the street, and I see a car coming, and they all drive too fast in the neighborhood. I don't know what's wrong with these people. Say the car's coming, and I see Garrison in the street. I have to rush out and save his life. Is his life worth saving? That's the first question. Of course. Okay, second question is his life worth saving? Is it worth me saving his life if I rush out in the street and in the process I get killed saving my boy? Yeah, that's what any parent would do. They wouldn't even think about their own life, would they? I mean, not even a thought. So here's the third question. This is where things really came together for me. Is his life worth saving even though he wasn't supposed to be in the street in the first place? Yeah. And that's where everything made sense to me. Your life was worth saving even though you weren't supposed to be in the street in the first place. You get it? That tells me, despite what pastors and teachers and other leaders and other dysfunctional people, because we all have our baggage, tell you, and you're going to be uncomfortable, some of you, me telling you this, you are valuable and deserving. You are worth saving. You're not worth saving like the Jews thought they were because of the stuff that they did or did not do. They thought that's what made them worth saving, right? You are deserving of being saved and worthy of being saved because of who you are. You're God's kid. And God says, my kid is worth saving. And he didn't think twice. He sped from the throne of heaven, rushed across the universe, and died on the cross because that's what good parents do. And that's grace. So if anybody in here is struggling with this belief that you're hopeless and worthless, give yourself the gift of divorcing that lie and marrying the truth today that you matter. Not because I say you matter, and not because you say you matter, because you don't, but because he says you matter. If you didn't matter, he wouldn't have died for you, but he wanted to because you're his kid. And there are people here who don't relate to him on that level because he's this almighty God, and yes, he is, but he wants to be your dad. And as a kid, you know, sometimes a kid can get away with murder, as they say, right? And you don't stop loving him. You might get frustrated. You might get angry. But the love is always there, right? You understand? So now that you know there's no one in this room today that should ever have to leave this place feeling worthless and hopeless because that's a lie. It's a lie. I'm not saying you're worthy of being saved because of what you do and what you believe and don't put into your mouth or stomach. You get it? You're worthy because of your DNA. God's, I'm not saying you're immortal or divine. Understand what I'm saying? God's in you. He's your Father. You have a question. He knew you before the foundation of the world. Yep. 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 He has purpose for you. Yep. Amen. He knew you before he created the world, and you know what? He knew everything. And if I knew in advance my son was going to do something that would require my life, I'd still have my son. And with God, what's great with God is he knows that because of what he did, he has eternal life with you and me. What time is it? Okay. This is so important. If you miss what we're talking about here, none of the rest of what we're going to talk about matters. No one else I know teach it. I'm sure they teach it. But when it comes to this, since I'm a recovering pessimist, it's very close and personal to me. I am a recovering pessimist. I almost feel like I should go to AA or something like that because it's not something that happens overnight. You got to deal with it. It was 10 years. My son's 10. So 10 years ago I made this decision. These lights turned on. And it's a process because every once in a while I'll find myself slipping into this nonsense. But if I can do it, if the Lord can give me the grace to make this choice and have this new truth, which is not a new truth, it's his truth for my life, then anybody in here can do it. Anybody can do it. So if we're clear on what this means, let's make sure it's anchored, and then we'll move on to the 4 skills that we need to kind of anchor our optimism, the 4 habits. First of all, what they found that over and above their test scores and training, Optimists always do better than pessimists, even if the pessimist has better training and higher skills. If you want an edge, choose to be an optimist. And being an optimist starts realizing that you're deserving and valuable. Yes? Yep. Yep. Yes. Right. Right. Yep. Yep. I know. You're absolutely right. It isn't. I'm going to tell you right now, and I can get a lot of flack, and maybe Glenn will cancel my invitation for next year, but sometimes the way the church chooses to communicate what it believes to be true is done at the expense of, disempowering people. I believe. I'm not saying the church is wrong. I'm just saying there's a better way to communicate what we believe. Because I know what they're saying when you're saying that song and everything else. It's just the message coming through is different for some people like me. Not everybody in here. If you were actually raised in a healthy home, and some of you were raised to feel like you're valuable and deserving, you can hear that song and you don't get the message that I get when I'm listening to it. All right, so let's keep going. Here it is. Let's break it down. A pessimist's outlook. Success, if they have success, it's due to something somebody else did or they got lucky. If they fail, going back to what you say, it's because of their personal faults. They're failures, so how can they expect anything else but failure? A crisis is an overwhelming obstacle, and here's the most important point, the last bullet point. A pessimist feels that they lack control over their life. If you feel, so to put it another way, they feel like life is in control of them. If you feel like life is in control of you, you're a pessimist. And you're a pessimist because you feel undeserving and worthless. You with me? And so what you're doing is, to make it even clearer, you're living a life of reaction. Since you're not in control, all you can do is react to everything that comes into your life. You react to your relationships, you react to your boss, you react to your church. And so what you do a lot of times is you run and escape and try to, hide yourself from it. Or once in a while you'll rebel and try to demand something because you're sick of feeling so worthless. But you're a pessimist if you feel like life's in control of you and you're living a life of reaction. Now, an optimist, on the other hand, if they have success, well, they earned it. If they fail, it's because, well, it was bad luck or somebody else messed up. It's not that they're blaming someone. They're not internalizing the failure. You see the difference? A crisis is a challenge. These folks actually get excited when they see a crisis because when I was at the hospital, from time to time, the CEO would say in meetings, folks, we're facing a situation that's rich with opportunity. And I knew he wasn't talking about this. He was talking about, folks, we have a problem we got to figure out here. And so they see this as a challenge to grow, to become more, to become better. And the most important bullet point is at the end. An optimist feels that they are in charge of life. They don't believe they're in charge of everything that happens in life, but they believe that they're, and I want to talk about that when we get to vision, hopefully I can remember. They feel that they're in charge of life, and because of that, they actually live a life of action. They make plans, they set goals, they take action, because they're worthy and deserving of taking action and achieving it. You see the difference? So if you feel like life's in charge of you, you're a pessimist, which means you're undeserving and worthless is what you feel. If you feel like you're in charge of life, then likely you feel worthy and deserving, and you live a life of action. That is wrapping up this first section of really what it means to be an optimist or a pessimist, because a lot of people I see teaching the subject, they boil it down to nothing more. You got to choose positive language. You got to use positive thoughts. If you're a pessimist, if you have a pessimist in your life, the last thing you want to tell them is you need to be more positive. That drives them nuts. And they will punish you for it, for telling them that. I've done it. Because a lot of pessimists are passive-aggressive. I've done that too. So if you're dealing with someone in your life who's really living in that dark place, and you want to help them, one of the best things you can do, this is not part of this lecture, I don't think so, one of the best things you can do to help them, don't preach to them. Figure out something nearby that you can go do together with them to help somebody else. I don't know if it's helping the homeless, feeding someone, collecting clothes, whatever you can get them to do as a humanitarian endeavor to help another person, a cause, an organization, that will raise their value because they'll see the appreciation coming. They're not doing it to get the appreciation, but you're getting them out of their own head, and you're actually helping them serve somebody else to make a difference. It's a shortcut to help them get through this nonsense. All right, we're going to shift right now to the mind-body connection, show you how important this attitude thing is, and then very quickly we're going to go over the 4 things. And I'll take a quick question, then I've got to finish. Yes, sir. Yeah, the helper's high they talk about, right? Yep, so it's not just for them. It's really great if you could partner a pessimist, a former pessimist like me. You strike me as an optimist you have all week long. It'd be nice, it'd be a joy to work with someone like you to do something like that. You know, I mean, that's a really good win-win situation. The mind-body connection. Scientists have looked, this was a 20-year study, I think it was, and they were tracking the effect that worry might have on heart attack risk. Those who rarely worry is very low. Those who worry a lot, it was 150% higher than the people in the yellow. Now let me ask you, is worry a choice? Worry is a choice. Worry is actually faith working in reverse. But if you feel worthless and hopeless, you think you're going to be worrying quite a bit. You will, because you feel like life's in charge of you. You don't have any control or anything to say about it, so you're going to worry a lot. But when you make this decision to make the shift of what we just talked about, you'll be worrying a lot less. Laughter in your heart. Now, this is the first principle for trying to anchor optimism in your life. It's laughing. It's seeing the bright side of life. They've tracked people at heart attacks, because the risk of a subsequent heart attack is pretty high. For a year, they had one group have meditation, quiet time. The other group watched funny videos, and they wanted to see if it had an effect. At the end of the year, the group that watched funny videos, only 2 had subsequent heart attacks versus 10 in the other group that had quiet time. So the researchers checked cortisol, and what they found was the cortisol levels were pretty much the same, stress hormone at the beginning of the research study, but as the year progressed, those who watched the funny videos, it lowered their stress dramatically. And that spread right there, whatever that is that like a 35-point spread, is the difference between 2 heart attacks and 10 heart attacks. So if you want to be an optimist, one of the things that you can do is try to the best of your ability to always see the brighter side of life every day. Smile. There's Dale right there. Think of something you can smile about, and that'll instantly relieve that type of stress. They say that kids laugh 400 times a day. We only laugh 15 times a day. You lose 385 laughs between childhood and adulthood. I think that's really cute. I'm thinking, well, if my son had to worry about the rent, the car payment, the insurance, the clothes, the groceries, all that other stuff, he might not be laughing 400 times a day either. I'm not sure. It's just a hunch. But laughter is the first principle of anchoring that optimism in your life. The second principle, I have time. I don't have to rush as fast as I'm rushing. Okay. The second principle is the power of hope. Face it, there are times in life where it is not a laughing matter. There'll be times in your life, and it's happened to me a couple of times in the last 2 years, where you're going to be standing beside a graveside just weeping because you've laid somebody to rest that you love, or someone's been diagnosed with stage 2 or 3 cancer, and you're not going to laugh because you don't laugh. You're going to cry. But even in those moments, we can have a sense of hopefulness, especially as people of faith. Maybe the physical cure won't come, but we have eternal life to look forward to. And there are some other cures, spiritual and emotional and relational cures we may experience in that death process. Dr. Norman Cousins, this was written up, I think, in the New England Journal of Medicine. You've heard of Cousins? So he was at a conference on oncology, and he overheard 2 oncologist doctors talking about the results they're having working with their cancer patients. And they've been asked to present their findings, and one doctor was mad, and the other was trying to make the doctor feel better. 2 doctors, 2 colleagues. They both used the same treatment, the same drugs, the same protocols, but one guy was only getting a 22% success rate with his cancer patients. The other was getting a 74% success rate with his patients. Now, if you had cancer, which doctor would you want to have? The 74%er guy, right? So as they were talking, so what they did was they gave the same protocols. When this was taking place, it was very likely, and still to some degree today, I imagine, that they would give you 4 drugs. They would give you etoposide, oncovin, platinol, and hydroxyurea. So what this doctor with the 22% success rate was telling his patients, I'm giving you 4 drugs that we've abbreviated to call EPO, E-P-O-H. Etoposide, platinol, oncovin, and hydroxyurea. That's what they did. That's what they do. And if you're a doctor and you're seeing someone every 15 or 20 minutes, you're not going to list those 4 names of those drugs every patient you visit. You're going to abbreviate stuff. I mean, hospitals are famous for acronyms. It's like they're shorthand. And so, So what the doctor with the 74% did, he said, he's lying in his bed one night, he's saying to himself, why am I telling my patients I'm giving them EPO? And so he started telling his patients, I'm giving you 4 drugs that we call HOPE. We're giving you hope. And you know, that is the only thing he had been doing differently. Same drugs, same protocol, same treatment, but implanting the sense of hopefulness in the hearts of his patients yielded a, 52% greater result from 22% to 74%? So if you want to be a person, an optimistic person, if you want to anchor that sense of worthiness and deservingness, not only look at the brighter side of life, but be hopeful. Being hopeful is a choice. It's a choice. Be hopeful. There's always hope. Patients who are highly hopeless, we find that their diseases spread sometimes 3 times faster than people who have more hope than they have. This mind-body connection is real. So be hopeful. And you know what? This is really nice for us in the sense of this shows us we don't have to be a Dr. Oz or Sanjay Gupta to help people out in our hospitals or schools or churches. They come to us, we don't have the answer, and really they might be in a situation that has a very final endpoint. But we can take them in our arms and say, you're not alone. We're in this together, and I'm going to be with you the whole way. And I love you, and I'm going to care for you, and something good, we'll work towards something good to come of this. Every person in this room can impart a sense of hopefulness to the people God brings into their life. If all you do is impart hopefulness, you've done your job. I'm not going to go into the placebo effect. Ministry of Healing, page 241. She says, and this Ministry of Healing has been around for over 100 years, my favorite book. Disease is sometimes produced and is often greatly aggravated by the what? Imagination. Many are lifelong invalids who might be well if they only thought so. Many imagine that every slight exposure will cause illness, and the evil effect is produced because it is expected. Many die from disease, the cause of which is wholly imaginary. Power of the mind. You need to be in charge of your mind. Not your pastor, your conference president, not your spouse. You need to be in charge of this. God has the power to coerce you to make him be in charge, but even he won't take charge of your mind. He wants you to surrender to him. But a good parent does not try to force and coerce their kid, do they? They want them to grow and to learn and the character to develop. So God wants you to be in charge of your mind and not give it to anybody else. In fact, they did a study and they found that just watching 11 to 13 minutes of the evening news sends people into a mental state they call catastrophizing. 11 to 13 minutes of the evening news. Now, if you were raised feeling that you were worthy and deserving, that might not happen to you. But for many of us who are raised the other way, it has that effect on us if we're not aware of what's going on. I can watch the news and it doesn't affect me at all now that I know what's happening, right? Okay, so she says, health reformer, we published this as a church in 1871. She says, I frequently turn from the bedside of these self-made invalids, saying to myself, dying by inches, dying of indolence, a disease which no one but themselves can cure. I'm not saying that you can cure every disease that you have simply with your brain, okay? What we're trying to highlight here is the connection between the mind and the body, because there is a connection. They affect each other. So the question is, who's in charge of your mind? You better be in charge of your mind. And I suggest the second thing you do today besides surrendering your life to Jesus Christ would be you divorcing the lie that you're worthless and undeserving and marrying the truth that you are worthy and valuable. That's a choice everybody in this room is invited to make, and only you can make it. I can't make it for you. And if you decide not to make it, you don't lose your salvation. It just means you're going to be miserable. Gratitude's the third way to anchor an optimistic orientation. We talked about seeing the brighter side of life through laughter. We talked about hopefulness. I'm not spending a lot of time on gratitude. I have other stuff I want to talk about. But basically, in a 20-year study, they found that people who are grateful are healthier on every metric. They live longer, they have better relationships, and they're happier. Should that be surprising to anybody? So we have a choice. We can either count our blessings, or we can count, as Dr. Guthrie says, we can count our burdens. Every day you can count your blessings or count your burdens. And if I were you, and you're just starting out with trying to be an optimistic person, I'd think of 3 things as I'm waking up or going to bed that I'm thankful for. Doesn't have to be anything profound, just 3 things you're thankful for. And do it over and over and over again. Ministry of Healing, page 251. Nothing tends more to promote health of body and soul than does a spirit of gratitude and praise. It is a positive what? Duty to resist melancholy. That hurts because I have that in me, melancholic. It is a positive duty to resist melancholy, discontented thoughts and feelings, as much a duty as it is to what? Pray. If we are heaven-bound, how can we go as a band of mourners, groaning and complaining all along the way to our Father's house? Yep. There are reasons why people do that. I'm not getting into it today. That's another seminar. And by the way, you see these Ellen White quotes? I use these quotes when I'm teaching at camp meeting or at a church, when I'm teaching a public creation health seminar. I mean, these are quotes I added to the material. And there are templates in the creation health material. Many of you are clinical people, so there's a template for Outlook. You could add in material you want your people to know. I don't use these quotes when I'm just teaching in the public, for no other reason than I'm not comfortable with that. So gratitude. Sir St. Francis of Assisi said, if you don't have everything you want, be thankful for the things you don't have that you don't want. There is always something to be thankful for. So we're talking about laughter, hope, and gratitude. Now we're going to talk about vision. Good. Vision is having something to live for. Doesn't have to be big. To get yourself started, it could be, well, using my example, I told you already this week I was sick last year and lost weight and regained weight, and was talking with Mike Tucker this morning, and we're talking about the shoot in November, and I want to lose 15 pounds to get back to where I was before we do our November shoot, because I felt fat on camera at our last shoot a few weeks ago. No one said I looked fat, but then people joke and say, they always say the camera makes you look fatter, and then someone's always quick to say, well, how many cameras were on you? So you need to have something to live for. That's vision. And you have the privilege of choosing your vision. There was a man named Eugene Lang. Eugene Lang. He was from Harlem, New York. He's a white guy. He graduated from a class in Harlem, and the 6th grade class of his former school invited him back. He became a self-made millionaire. So they brought him back to give the 6th grade commencement address. I guess they thought he had something to say. And so he said, I prepared this speech. And I started delivering this speech. And there were 52 kids in that class. And he said, I realized that not a single one of them was paying attention to me. So he said, I decided, well, if they're not listening, I'll just put this speech aside and try to come up with something else on the spur of the minute. So he said, I started doing my best to recite the Martin Luther King Jr. I Have a Dream speech. This is Harlem, New York City. He said, I was shocked to see these kids were still not paying any attention to me. And he said, I had an insight. The reason why they weren't paying attention to me was because these kids didn't feel that it was even possible for them to have a dream. And he said, I told them, don't you think for a minute that you can't have a dream for your life, that you can't go on and become what you want to become. Because I'm making a promise to you tonight that for each of you who graduates from 12th grade, I will personally pay for your college tuition. You can go on and become whatever you want to become. He said, every eye was on me. He knew it was going to take more than money, so he helped set up a structure of accountability and tutoring and things like that to help these kids. And historically from that school in Harlem, you'd only have about 25% of the kids graduate from high school. So out of 52, that's roughly what? Let's just say 15. It's not, but it's roughly 10 to 15. And none would go into college. I mean, that's just the fact of that school. When graduation day came, how many of the 52 kids do you think graduated? All of them who were there, some might have died or moved. There were 48 of the 52 original 6th graders in that 12th grade class who graduated. So instead of 10 to 15, you had 48. Now, the next one surprises me a little bit, but how many do you think went on to college? It was 40. I don't know why all 48 didn't when you have that offer being made, right? But 40 went on to college when no one ever went on to college. He paid the college tuitions for 40 kids, this self-made millionaire from Harlem, New York. And they interviewed the kids afterwards, and they said, why were you successful? Why did you achieve this? And what they said over and over again was, for the first time in our life, we believed we had something to live for. So if you want to be a person who's optimistic, give yourself something to live for. You are worthy, you are deserving. You deserve to be living for something. It's your vision. So an optimist feels like they're in charge of life, but here's what you need to know, because this causes a disconnect in people. They say, well, we can't control everything in our life. Well, that's absolutely true, you can't. But in every single situation, you have the power to control your response to it. And do you notice I use the word response and not reaction? Don't like the word reaction. If you're an optimist, you don't react, you respond. Jesus showed us this on the cross. You had the religious leaders, you had Pilate, you had the soldiers. They're all nailing him there and killing him, each for their own reason. But the religious leaders wanted to kill him because he was a threat, right? They wanted to humiliate him and do away with all of his credibility and show the people around that he's a fake, that they should be following them instead of him. Look at what we have the power to do to him. That's what they intended that cross event to mean. That's the message they intended to communicate through that crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Yet Jesus on the cross, who could have come down, Jesus on the cross, he says, I know what you guys are intending this to mean to me. Because I'm thinking of Hebrews now. He says, for the joy set before him, he did what? He endured the agony. The Greek word is agony of the cross. For the joy set before him was not the joy of going back to the right hand of God, because he could have gone back to the right hand of God anytime he wanted to. What was the joy? Who was the joy? It was you. That's the only thing that would keep me on a cross is my son. The only thing that kept God on a cross was his kid, and that kid was you. So for the joy set before him, he endured the agony of the cross. And so he's telling these religious leaders, I know you're meaning this to humiliate me and to take away my credibility and you're trying to show who's boss, that it's not me, it's you. But I'm going to tell you, religious leaders, what this cross experience means to me. What this cross experience means to me is I get my family back. No matter what's happened to you, or how bad it was, or how bad it is, you can't control everything, and neither can I, but we can absolutely control our response to it and what it means to us. So choose an empowering meaning, something that supports your life, something that brings honor to Jesus Christ. Maybe there was someone horribly raped when they were 11, 12, or 13. You might take that meaning and say, you know what, I'm going to live my life to help people who have similar pain and do all I can to make sure that's not going to happen to anybody else. You can't stop it from everybody else, but you can certainly work along those lines and make something empowering from a very horrible situation. Understand? So when we talk about vision and being in charge of life, we're not talking about controlling everything that happens to you because we can't. We're talking about controlling our response to it. What time is it? Numbers 13. You have these 12 spies. How many said they could take the land? 2. Now this is really, it's astonishing that 2 said they could take the land. You know why it's astonishing? Look at this. This is something else I'm adding to the material. I don't teach this when I'm doing Creation Health publicly. The Lord spoke to Moses saying, send men to spy out the land of Canaan. Read that. What does it say? Which I am giving to the children of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one a leader. So this is a particular type of people he's leading to spy out the land. But God is telling him, I am giving you this land. If God were to tell you today he's giving you something, would you believe he could follow through and give it to you? So 10 of these leaders say what? It can't be done. God was so mad, he wanted to kill everybody as a punishment. And Moses says, don't do it, because if you do, the surrounding nations will say that you as a God are no better than the gods that they supposedly worship. If God and Moses were ever on the same page when it came to punishing Israel, the nation would have been gone. So what God did was, instead, he sent a plague, so to speak, on the leaders. Well, before that, God told him he's going to punish them, and they wouldn't make it in. So what did these geniuses try to do? They went to war, didn't they? Did they succeed? They were devastated. So they were right. They couldn't take the land, at least alone. But they never were going to be sent alone. If you're a leader in the church or a leader in the hospital, a leader in the school, you need not to speak discouraging words. That does not mean that you don't accept a challenge and struggle with how to find solutions to improve or make the situation better, right? It does mean you don't have this fatalistic idea, though, because it's not about you. It's about you and God and what can be done through his power and through your willingness. So these guys go to try to take the land, and they get defeated, and they get massacred. But who was right? The 2 or the 10? They were both right, because if you believe you can't, you can't. If you believe you can, you can. That's a lesson for me. So which group do you want to be in? Yeah, this group that says we can. Here's the thing. We as a people, we get scared or lazy or whatever it is and say, well, we're going to pray about it. I'm all for prayer. But when you've been praying about it for 3 or 4 years now, when the prayer committee's been praying about it for 3 or 4 years, that's something we need to discuss. You have Moses with the children of Israel fleeing Pharaoh, army behind, mountain and desert to the side. You have the sea ahead of them. They didn't have a prayer committee. They sought God. God said, go forward. Didn't make any sense. If Moses wouldn't have gone forward, would God have parted the sea? No. Moses stepped forward. The sea parted. The Israelites escaped. Moses gave God something to bless. Moses gave God something to work with. Not that God needed it, but that's what people who trust God do. They respond to God's leading, even when it doesn't make sense sometimes. The worst thing you can do, as has been said oftentimes, is what? Nothing. Okay, what do you see in this sentence? This string of letters makes a sentence. Yep. What do you think I saw the first time I saw this string of letters? I saw opportunities nowhere. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I want to help people in my room. This is not about me looking good. This is about helping you. I saw opportunity is nowhere, because that's what I believe to be true for my life. LaMountains don't get opportunities. We get lucky, if that. Here's our reality. We need wisdom. James 1:5 says, ask. If you don't know what to do, ask. If you need power, Philippians 4:13 says, ask. We can do everything through him who strengthens me. Ephesians 3:20, now to him who is able to do far more abundantly beyond all we ask or think. We don't lack resources. Here's the thing. God won't make the choice for you. He's a dad. And all dads and moms, they want their kids to grow. They want their character to grow. There are a lot of things I wish I could do for my son. You know, one of them, I wish I could have learned how to ride the bike for him. It would have saved him some pain. Last summer, I took the attitude. He was 8 years old, going on 9 last summer. It's time for him to ride the bike. He had a bad experience 2 or 3 years previous to that, and he broke his wrist, and so he's afraid of the bike. So I decided last summer, my son loves me and trusts me. I said, we're going to learn to ride the bike. We're up at his grandparents' house. I want to ride the bike with the training wheels, you know. No, we're going to learn to ride the bike. I'm going to be with you. You might fall, but you're going to be okay. So for a couple evenings, a couple hours each night, you know how it is. You taught your kids how to ride bikes. That's what I did for him. I'd like to have spared him a couple bruises, but he wouldn't be able to ride the bike today. And so I ask him, when we go bike riding at home, I'll ask him, you know, every other time, a third time, I'll say, okay, so your tricycle's still here if you'd like to ride that with me when we go ride bikes right now. And I don't want the tricycle. Well, you wanted the tricycle so badly, why don't you want it now? Because I can go so much faster on my bike. So it's just, you know, there are things we'd like to do for our kids that we can't. There are things God would like to do for you that he won't because it would stunt your growth. So he must allow us to be in places that will challenge our character, our values, our beliefs, because that's how we grow. So you've got to make a decision. God's not going to make it for you. You'll be saved even if you don't make the decision to fully follow him when it comes to these things like crossing the sea, but you know, your life will just be miserable and unhappy. It's your choice. So what keeps people stuck? Let's wrap this up with this. Martin Seligman said, we learn to be helpless. What they did was they did a project with dogs, research study with dogs. I hate this one because I love dogs, but I'm going to share it. They put these dogs in cages. You know what they did? They shut the cage. The cage was electrified with a small current, so it would shock the pads of the dog's feet, and the dog would turn around and bang its head against the door trying to get out. It couldn't, so it would go and lie in the corner, curled up in a ball. They did that for a few times, and finally the day came, put the dog in the cage, they left the door open, turned the electricity on. What do you think the dog did? Went to the corner and curled up. So he said, to begin with, the dog felt like it was in charge of its situation and tried to get out, but we taught it that it was not in charge of its situation, and it accepted its circumstances and took the punishment. So they didn't want to leave the dogs in that condition, so what the researchers did was they went in, and they had to lift the dog up, and they had to move its legs for it, and they fake walked it out of the cage. They repeated that a number of times until finally the day came, put the dog in the cage, they opened the door, they turned the power on, what did the dog do? Ran out of the cage. So Seligman said, we've learned that we can condition a creature to feel like it's in charge of its life again. So once you lose the truth of being in charge of life, it's not forever lost. If you've learned to be helpless, like many of us learned growing up, you can learn to be in charge again, which is good news. So what we do with Creation Health is, from night 1 through week 8, with me, I'm trying to get people to do something every week that's small, that they will do. It's not big. Because what I'm trying to do, without them knowing it, taking them by the hand, helping them take action, and when Creation Health is done, they're not in that cage anymore. Because now they feel a sense of empowerment and support, and that they might not be where they want to be or need to be, but they're on their way. And they've been the ones that have been doing it for themselves. I know God's at work too, but you know what I'm saying? Dag Hammarskjöld was in charge of the United Nations in the 60s. He was a Christian. His plane got shot down in Africa. He died in that crash. But he said this, we act in faith and miracles occur. We act in faith and miracles occur. For some of you, I'd like to give you the good news that your miracle is waiting for you. The miracle is there. Some miracles God brings to you and gives them to your hands, puts them right in your hands. Some miracles, God says, the miracle is over here. Come get it. Rick? Amen. Nicely said. We can't do God's part. We try. And he won't do our part. All right, it's time to end. If you want to change your outlook, first decision you need to make is that you're worthy and what? Deserving. Some of you will think that that's blasphemous to even admit that thought. But there's grace there for you. There was for me. And at the end of the day, it's the choice that you have for your life. I invite you to divorce the lie that you're worthless and undeserving and marry the truth that you're worthy and deserving, because that's how God views you. He sees you through the eyes of a father. In fact, when the prodigal son went back to his dad saying, I'm not even worthy to be your son, just let me be a servant, his father ignored him. Did you notice that? Just ignored it. Didn't even respond to it. Hey, go get my kid the royal robe and the royal ring. This is my son and he's home. Didn't even care about the other stuff. She says if you don't divorce the lie and you cling to the lie, you're calling Jesus a liar. You certainly are disagreeing with his truth for you that you are worthy and deserving because you're his kid. Believe his word. Believe him. Believe him. I like that. If you can't believe it yourself fully right now, believe what he says is truth. Thank you, Betty. I appreciate that. So you make that choice. You believe what's the truth about you. Then you practice optimism by seeing the brighter side, living with a vision, being hopeful, and expressing gratitude. Pray, talk to God, share with him everything that's on your heart and mind. He already knows. He already has a solution. He already has an answer. It might not be the one you want. It might hurt a little bit because it might challenge you beyond your comfort zone, but that's okay. That's the way things happen. I do things to my son, too, to make him grow a little bit that he doesn't like, and I realize God's doing that to me, so that's okay. I wouldn't have it any other way. Express gratitude, thank God for his blessings, and realize that your mind and body are intimately connected. So what do you see now, everybody in the room? Opportunity is now here. Now you just have to believe it and own it. I like what Thoreau says, Henry David Thoreau says, it's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see. You're only one choice away today from living a better life, and some of you know right now what that choice needs to be. And I pray that you'll make it so you can live your life to the fullest. I'm going to have prayer with you. The outlook. Every single week I had intended on doing that first. I don't have a lot of time. I can stay around. Okay, the first line. First of all, I want to, for the last time, thank Florida Hospital for donating these to us. I was not planning on bringing them. They donated 90. I was expecting about 80 people here this week. Yesterday, there were 300 people in the room. So I feel bad there are some people who did not get these. It's not because we didn't think of you, don't love you. It's because, this was a gift. And so we were hoping maybe one per family, you know. And the gift that Florida Hospital gave us, it's worth $3,500. That's why I wasn't going to bring them. So this very kind of Adventist Health system to support this meeting over here in the Carolina Conference. So the first blank is we can learn to be positive. We can learn to be positive. Success, second one. Success or happiness is not a matter of good or bad luck. Happens by design. Success or happiness is not a matter of good or bad luck. It happens by design. Next one. Destiny is not a matter of chance. It's a matter of choice. Destiny is a matter of choice. Fourth line. I'm going fast. Got to close. We're over. Optimists keep a positive attitude. Optimists keep a positive attitude, like we talked about, those four things. And they focus on their goals. Next line. Optimism can be what? Learned. Can be learned. And the last one is have a clear vision. That's not the last one. We have one more. Have a clear vision for your life. Have a clear vision. You get to decide what that is. And the last one, gratitude brings joy to your life, so count your blessings every day. Yep. Count your blessings every day. I'm going to pray. I don't have long to stay afterwards. I have to finish packing and then get to the airport, but I want to pray. I'll be here for a few minutes afterwards. And don't let me forget my computer, okay, back there. Thanks. All right. Let's pray. Well, first of all, before I pray, I just want to say thank you for being a wonderful group this week. I've done a lot of camp meetings. I enjoy them every time, but there's been a real special bond here between me and you, and I've really enjoyed the meetings this week. Thank you for being here and for having me. It's been a privilege. You what? Oh, is he? That's the strength that they have. Talking about a kid who has Asperger's. Not a kid, he's an adult now. He's a mathematical genius. Maybe my kid will make a lot of money and I don't have to worry about retirement. See? There's the pessimism kicking in. Did you see it? I don't have to worry about retirement? Okay. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you so much for literally being the best dad that any kid could ever hope for or ask for. You love us no matter what. You did what you did because you want us in your life. Although many of us are parents and we understand parental love, I'm not sure, if we can understand the depths of your love, but we have a glimpse and we're eternally grateful. Please bless my friends as they leave this place. Lord, you know each person here who might be struggling with this sense of unworthiness and undeservingness. I pray in the name of Jesus Christ, through the power of your Holy Spirit, that you'll go into their heart right now and just embrace them with your unconditional love so that they will know that they are enough and they measure up because they're your kid. Lord, please bless us, keep us safe, bless our families who are not here, and we look forward to seeing you face to face in that near future when Jesus Christ returns, as I pray in your name. Amen. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of the weekend.